Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the video lecture. Today's lecture, last in class actually. In class, you guys reviewed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and you have studied it extensively. You looked at all the sections of these different amendments, and you analyzed them and put them in your own words. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to show you what the state of Virginia wants you to know about these amendments. So the focus question at the end of these slides that you're going to answer on the Edmodo site, you're going to go ahead and the question will be, why do you have to know just these parts of the amendments and not the stuff that we studied in class? And let's go ahead and look it up. The SOL is USII3a, which is the beginning of Reconstruction, and these are the Civil War amendments. Now, the Civil War amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. They were added during and after Reconstruction. And remember, the Constitution is the highest law of the land. That means if you are to make these three amendments, you cannot have a state law nor a federal law to interfere with that. If there is a federal law that interferes with that, the courts will look into that law and decide whether or not it is a clear violation of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. That's important, especially when we're going to be talking about the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment as we get closer to the end of Reconstruction and Jim Crow laws, because there's a very important case called Plessy v. Ferguson that talks about the limits of some of these amendments. There is a basic rule for understanding the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments for the SOL test, and that is you got to be free, or you have to be free, I'm sorry, to know your rights in order to vote. You have to be free the slaves, 13th Amendment. That's 13, have to be free, 13, free the slaves. To know your rights, 14th, which is rights of citizens and what a citizen is. So, got to be free to know your rights, and that's 13, 14. In order to vote, which is the 15th Amendment, which is, of course, voting rights. So we're going to remember that mantra. You got to be free to know your rights in order to vote. You're going to memorize that by the end of this lesson and by the end of this year. So let's start with the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment is very simple. It bans slavery in the United States and all of its territories. So, you know, the Civil War, towards the end of the Civil War, the issue became truly slavery. At the end of with the Emancipation Proclamation, even though it's a federal law that says, you know, we're freeing slaves that are taken by the, you know, that we come across in the South, that isn't enough. What they need to have is an amendment to ensure that there's no new federal law or there's no state law that can contradict that. So, 13th Amendment is strictly ban slavery in the United States and all of its territories. Then you come across the 14th Amendment, Section 1. Is the only section that is referred to in the SOL, not section 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. I just say section 5 is just you know, Congress can make a law that enforces it. It's kind of a standard in all amendments. But this amendment, the section 1, is the important one that we need to focus for the SOL. And section 1 does this. First, it grants citizenship to all people born or naturalized in the United States. Not only does it grant citizenship, it defines a citizen as someone who is born here or has gone through the naturalization process. Now, I assume that most, or if not all of you, are born in the United States. You were born here, therefore you are a U.S. citizen. If you're born in a base, you're born on U.S. territory, so you're still a U.S. citizen. There's other rules too that apply. Like if you're born out of the country, but you have a parent that is a U.S. citizen, then you, of course, will automatically be a U.S. citizen. So that, you know, if you're accidentally born in Canada for some strange reason, you won't be a Canadian, you'll be American. But naturalization is something we're going to be discussing later on as we get closer to immigration. And naturalization is the process of becoming a U.S. citizen, which has changed over the years. Over the years, there have been more and more regulations on naturalization, but we're going to discuss that. But that is the process of becoming a citizen. So once you're naturalized, you are a U.S. citizen, and the rights of the 14th Amendment apply. In fact, and the rights of the 14th Amendment is that the government cannot deny your rights as a citizen. They can't deny you the right to life, liberty, or property without what's called due process. Due process is equal protection under the law. Now, the due process would be, say, if you were arrested, you're allowed to have a fair trial. You're allowed to have a fair, a speedy trial, a core of your peers, so forth. These are rights granted in the Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment, and the Seventh Amendment, and you are, of course, in the Eighth Amendment. All those are part of the due process laws, but they have to make sure it's within the states, because after this war, you had a conflict between what is more powerful, federal law or state law, and the 14th Amendment says that it really does apply to the state as well, rather than just to the federal government. So the thing is, state law has to protect the rights of its citizens, unless the citizen is found, for example, guilty of a crime and is incarcerated, or they have to, or their property is taken. But that process of going through the justice system, of being fairly treated by the justice system, is called due process. We'll have a lot of discussion on the issue of due process, and when we talk about some instances, both in the past and in the present, that we see to be a violation of due process, even though we haven't really focused on that. All right, 15th Amendment. So to review, let's go ahead and review. 13th Amendment is you got to be free, which is ban slavery. 14th Amendment is to know your rights, rights of the citizen. Government cannot deny the rights of citizens, and that's a process called due process. In order to vote. So the 15th Amendment ensures all citizens the right to vote regardless of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude. But you need to be careful with the 15th Amendment, because the question is, what is a citizen? Or who has the rights to vote in the citizen? So you need to think about who had the right to vote before the 15th Amendment. Think about who didn't have the right to vote after the 15th Amendment. And that's something we're also going to be discussing in class as we go through this 9 weeks and into the next 9 weeks. So, got to be free, 13th Amendment, to know your rights, rights of citizens, 14th Amendment, in order to vote, which is the 15th Amendment. Okay? Now, this is an interesting portion with the 15th Amendment. Ensures all citizens have the right to vote regardless of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude. We're going to be discussing the term with previous conditions of servitude. Is a very important case, because the idea is previous conditions of servitude means that were you an indentured servant, were you a slave, or were you incarcerated and had your 13th Amendment denied because you are now incarcerated within the state. I'm talking about ex-felons not having the right to vote unless they have to go through a specific process to get those rights back. So, let us go to the focus question. The focus question is this. There's a couple parts. In this focus question, you're going to answer this questions in the Edmodo site. Or you're going to write, if you don't have the Edmodo site working, your internet's not working at home, this is what you will write in your journal section of your notes. And you have to show it to me when we see each other in class next day. The question is, why do the notes focus on the first sections of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment? Why does the state of Virginia focus on those sections of the amendments? The second question I want you to think about, whose rights are we referring to and why? Whose rights are we talking about with the 13th, and 14th, and 15th Amendment? Okay? Is it all Americans? Is it just one group of Americans? And why is it that one group of Americans, or why is it all Americans, if you believe? And the other question is, whose rights are not referred to and why? So there are certain portions, I told you, as a heads up, especially on the 15th Amendment, that there are some people whose rights are not referred to. And explain to me, why was that? Why do you think that's true? Okay? And that is, and by the way, those are focus questions. I want one more thing, just make sure you understand the idea of equal protection under laws, okay? And then we'll discuss that question as we go later. All right, so that is these are your video notes for the day. They're very short, and what I want you to do is go on the Edmodo site and go ahead and review or discuss or put your post into the discussion forum. Okay? Enjoy your evening.